Are you a Captain America or are you an Iron Man? That's a pretty cool question, in my opinion. Um, let's go ahead and expand on that so that you guys know what I'm talking about. But that's my question to y'all for this video. Are you a Captain America or are you an Iron Man? Quick disclaimer before anyone kicks my butt like through the screen. We're going with the MCU iteration of both of these characters. So we're going with MCU Tony Stark slash Iron Man, and we're going with MCU Steve Rogers slash Captain America. So first off, let's define both of these characters, what they're known for, some of the basics, before we get into the nitty gritty of this question, which isn't as deep as you guys think. But let's just go ahead and dive into it and see if you guys like it. So, who is Tony Stark in the MCU? He was a super mega rich billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, businessman, and one that's kind of left out but sticks to the point of this video, engineer. As well as, and something that tends to get left out also, is a founding member of the Avengers team in the MCU, which apparently in the comics is not the case. Didn't know that, unless I'm getting that mixed up, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. It's honestly, I know it's kind of a sidebar, but it's very interesting that Captain America and Iron Man were like B-list superhero characters before the MCU popped off. It's such a weird revelation figuring that out. But let's get back on track. So that's who Tony Stark, not Tony Stark's Ghostface Killer, Tony Stark. That's who Tony Stark was in the MCU prior to his, situation against Thanos. In addition to being a founding member of the Avengers, I also consider him, and it was pretty much clarified and confirmed by himself, that he was basically the engineer of the team. Tony functioned by creating all the cool stuff and gadgets that pretty much the whole Avengers team used, as well as he himself and Pepper and anyone else that was around him, pretty much. But he was not the leader of the team, or at the very least, he was not formally dubbed or acknowledged as the leader of the team, as boss, right? There's proof of this. When you look at Avengers 2 Age of Ultron, and Tony confirmed this and was talking to Agent Hall. And she was talking to Tony and say, "Hey, boss, I got to go over this information about these two mutants with you, or these two, whoever that you guys fought." And Tony was like, "Oh, no, I'm not the boss. I'm just the guy that builds all the cool stuff that everyone uses and da da." He's the boss, pointing at Captain America, Steve. And I was like, "He's the boss, right?" And then from there, Steve and Agent Hall go off and talk about Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch and just getting the gist of their powers as far as I could tell at the time. And the movie went on from there. Which takes us to the other half of this situation, Steve Rogers, aka Captain America. He's considered not only one of the founding members of the Avengers, one of the main leaders of the Avengers, but is pretty much considered the leader of the Avengers, right? So he's the guy, the whole Superman kind of parallel, Boy Scout, that whole thing, Boy in Blue, literally, all that stuff. So who was Cap? Cap was a World War II veteran that during his scuffle with Red Skull and trying to retrieve the Tesseract, ended up in a giant cryogenic sleep. He ended up in a cryogenic sleep by getting frozen in an iceberg, which eventually S.H.I.E.L.D. retrieved and stored him for a little bit until he eventually woke up. Now, while Tony Stark's titles, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, are all pretty cool and very honorable titles in some way than others, Steve Rogers has a more functional, hands-on type of skill set. He's a master strategist, tactician, hand-to-hand combatant in multiple forms of martial arts, with boxing, karate. I believe they say he knew kung fu as well. That's why he's one of the main people that trains up-and-coming heroes in hand-to-hand combat, because he knows more or less all of them. He's kind of like Batman in that regard, just on the light side. And as I mentioned, also kind of unlike, actually, now that I think about it, you can argue that Batman is basically Tony and Cap put into one, just fused together. That's basically what he is. Because just like Cap is one of the founding members of the Avengers, hand-to-hand combatant, master strategist, master tactician, all that stuff, all like Batman. The department that he lacks in is his finances, and he doesn't have the ability to provide resources to invest in the team and all that other stuff the way Batman does. But Tony has that covered. So you can argue that Tony and Steve are basically Batman just defused. And even then, they're both kind of on the lighter side. Even though Steve is formally acknowledged as the leader of the Avengers, and he's the one that was able to do the Avengers Assemble call at the end of Avengers Endgame, Tony was also acknowledged as a leader type of person within the team, hence Civil War. That he wouldn't have been able to pull that off if people didn't think he was some type of, as arrogant as he was he still was a voice of some type of logic in addition to being, I mean, he was innovative as well as an actual inventor. He eventually learned how to fight to a decent degree. I still think if it was, even with the armor on, it was just hand to hand and no blast, I still think he would get wrecked by Cap and Bucky and yeah, just pretty much everybody. Yeah, I could be wrong, but that's just how I see it. Either way, Tony is has a leadership position in the team, or at least prior to his character being unalived, and yet he's not formally acknowledged as the leader of the team. But he's able to do more for the team, both strategy, tactics, not as good as Captain America, of course, but to a good degree by most people's standards, resources being his main thing, money and all this other stuff. You can even argue that business connections may also be good for him, even though that part, I don't think that part's ever really showed in the MCU, but we can just assume that he has a decent network behind him that if he needed something, he can reach out to somebody. Cap doesn't really have these type of things. He's good for fighting and just being a general, just decent human being. That's really it. Like that's his main thing. So why was Cap painted and pretty much confirmed to be the leader of the Avengers, whereas Tony was not formally at least? So here comes my question, and this is more personal than anything for a video. This is something I just wanted. This might apply more to kids or just young adults or whoever. You can take this even outside of tech. This doesn't have to be tech business, where you can even just take this as like a life question, whatever helps. But I do want to ask, are you a Captain America or are you an Iron Man? I'm asking in a more literal sense. In Iron Man's case, are you an engineer? Are you someone that enjoys taking stuff apart, breaking them down, building them back up, making something new out of them, and making things appear out of thin air? Is that something you enjoy doing? Are you the type of person that enjoys creating something completely new that the world has never seen and that could ultimately shift the way that the world works? Or are you more like Captain America, whom I would define as an architect? If you know, one of the last videos I recorded, one of the last videos I posted was going over the difference between infrastructure and architecture. I would say infrastructure is more of Tony's thing, whereas architecture is more of Captain America's thing. And the Captain America half of this would be, are you someone that is well versed in taking what you have, identifying what these different things are used for, and arranging them in a way that is suitable for getting a job done, right? That can meet people's expectations, that can mitigate damage, that can mitigate cost, that responds well when things are kind of, the pressure's coming on, Are you that type of person? In other words, are you an innovator? That's another way. Are you an Iron Man or are you a Captain America? Are you an engineer or are you an architect? Are you an inventor or are you an innovator? That's what I kind of want people to know. And this does apply to the tech world when it comes to jobs and things like that. But again, now that I say it out loud, I think this is a good question to ask people kind of personally. Are you someone that enjoys the process of breaking things down, building back up, and creating something new? Or do you enjoy or have a natural inclination and ability to see what you have? What these different things, these 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 components are capable of, and you see a big picture where if you put this here and you put this here and this backs this and where the case is, and now you have a whole system that just flows effortlessly. You don't even have to think about it once things are in place, right? Are you that person? Because that's a very important skill. And I think as kids, if not young adults, we tend to put more stock in being able to create and being able to create something. You want to become someone and you want to create things that no one's ever seen. You don't even want a grain of sand, that from what you've made to be comparable to what someone else made. And I think for a lot of people, that becomes a genuine burden and level, or rather trigger of stress, right? And as cool as being an engineer sounds, like even as a job title, it would be cool if somehow I ended up with a job title with the word engineer in it. It just automatically sounds impressive. People know that architects are impressive, but we don't really push it. I think people know that architects make money, but I guess in some way the job title isn't as impressive, or they don't automatically make as much money. I don't know. But there are certain people who do that. And I think that's dangerous because, one, not everybody has the ability to create, but also it's just not their natural inclination. I think we have a lot more architects out here than we care to admit. But because we have never painted the best picture for what these things mean and how they can be applied, it scares people away. Who's to say that instead of being a business student, you could have been an architect student in college? Who's to say that instead of being an architect, you had the ability to create things from thin air or had the, interest of doing that, and you couldn't have went into software development, or you couldn't have went into engineering in a more traditional sense of hardware, building things up physically, computers and whatnot, right? You don't know, because a lot of these words, at least here, as an American, we've run from those things. We've always knew there was a level of being impressed by those titles, but we ran from them, right? So this is my attempt to paint a better picture when it comes to that. You can be cool. You can become, or, whether as a profession, you can be an engineer or an architect, but also identify that when it comes to who you are personally, right? I've come to a point, I'm in my late 20s, so I've kind of mellowed out. The light switch is kind of turned on or it's coming on. I've heard it, like when you hit 30, it really goes off. But, I've kind of reached a point, like 25, 26, where I kind of got over trying to force myself into spaces or trying to learn and do things, that just don't naturally align with me. Like, could I be a software developer? Yeah. I started learning Python and I found out I actually really like it up to a point. But if you want me to establish a web application that requires me to know 5 different languages, forget about it. I'm not doing it. Software developer slash engineer, it's not for me. I just don't have, the desire to learn that many different languages. But when it comes to architecture, maybe it's because of I'm a military brat, so maybe it's just my way I've just been, trained to think. But I actually enjoy taking different things and moving them around and seeing what fits here and who can I put here and what can I put here and all that stuff, and create a system where even when it comes to my routine, just creating something that things are in place and I don't really deviate from it that much, and I don't even have to think about it. I just get up and do it, right? So I've accepted that I'm more of a Captain America. I'm more of an architect, you know. And so I say that to say, don't sleep on your natural gifts, right? And I'm hoping this question helps you identify it as well as accept what you're naturally good at. Because I've always been good at this, but I never wore it on my sleeve and I never like pushed to build on it until now. Now I'm fairly old, right? So that's why I urge you guys to do. So again, are you an Iron Man or are you a Captain America? Are you an engineer or are you an architect? Are you an inventor or are you an innovator? And if you don't know what invention is versus innovation and why they're different, don't worry, we'll talk about that next. But I hope that was helpful for you guys. If you have any feedback for me, go ahead and leave that in the comment section down below. I appreciate you guys being here with me again. See you next time.